Good evening, neighbors. This is Ray Colton at the microphone for WMPQ 1240 on your dial, Maple Falls, Ohio. Sunday evening, July the 21st, 1946. It's been a fine week for the season, the kind of week you remember come January. The sweet corn is coming in good along the county road. You can smell it if you drive out past the Osborne place with your window down. The evenings are still long. A man can sit out on the porch after supper and not need a lamp till pretty near 9 o'clock. Katie did start it up out at my place Thursday night, right on schedule, same as always. Legion ball again Tuesday night out at the Diamond. Bring a cushion if you've got one. Those bleachers don't get any softer with the years, and I speak from experience. Tonight we've got the whole week's news for you. We've got the week's big news from Washington and the week's news from overseas. We've got the news from right here around the square and the news from your own kitchen table. We'll talk about a parade in the rain and about the price of hamburger. We'll talk about a ball game at Fenway Park that folks are going to be arguing about all summer. So get comfortable. Let's get to it. The story of the week comes from Washington, off the United Press wire, and it's one worth sitting still for. On Monday, July the 15th, the men of the 442nd Regimental Combat Team marched down Constitution Avenue. It was raining in Washington that morning, raining hard, the wire said, and it did not let up. These are American soldiers, Nisei of Japanese ancestry, born in this country, raised in this country, same as you and me. They marched in formation, rifles at shoulder, water running off their helmets all the way to the ellipse near the White House grounds. The wire described the column stretching for blocks, boots striking wet pavement in one steady rhythm, no man out of step. Crowds stood along the curb in that rain and did not go home. The wire made a point of saying that. Umbrellas up, hats dripping, and nobody moved until the whole regiment had passed. Now here is a fact I want to state plainly, once, and then leave alone. Many of these men have families who spent the war years in government relocation camps out west. That is simply the truth of it. I'll not dress it up and I'll not argue it. I'll just say it and move on, the way the wire itself did. Because while their kin waited out the war behind that fence wire, these very soldiers were fighting in Italy. They fought up through the mountains there, through some of the hardest ground any American unit saw in that whole war. Later they fought in France as well. The record on that is not in dispute anywhere I've read. Army cameramen were on hand at the ellipse, filming the whole ceremony, start to finish. You'll see it for yourself before long in the newsreel down at the Bijou. Watch for it. At the ellipse, President Truman himself came out into that weather to greet the regiment. He didn't send a deputy. He didn't wait for the rain to break. He came out and stood in it with them. He presented the regiment the Distinguished Unit Citation. That citation is the government's way of saying in the plainest terms it has, "We saw what you did, and we are grateful for it." And the President said something to those men that I want to give you exactly as he said it, because his words don't need any help from me. He said, "You fought not only the enemy, but you fought prejudice, and you have won." Let that sink in a minute. It's a big sentence for a rainy morning. That's the whole of the ceremony. No further words needed after that, and the wire didn't offer any. Now, Maple Falls did not send any Nisei boys off to that particular regiment. But Maple Falls sent its own boys to that same war, same as every town on this wire service, same as every town in this country. Some of our boys are home now. You'll see them behind the counter down at the hardware store, or clerking at the bank, or out at the Diamond Tuesday nights. You'll see some of them throwing batting practice to a bunch of kids who don't remember much about any of it, and are all the luckier for that. And some of our boys are not home, and are not coming home. You know their names as well as I do. I won't read a list. You don't need one from me. If your own boy served, you know exactly what a parade like that means, even heard secondhand, even 400 miles off, even by wire, even in the rain. You know what it costs a family to send a son off. You know it in your bones, whether the boy came home or not. And you know what it means when the whole country stands up in the rain and says so, out loud, where everybody can hear it. A town like ours doesn't need that explained to it. We already know. Now let's talk about your kitchen table, because that's been the week's other big story, and there's no easy way into it, so I'll just start. Price controls came off at midnight on June the 30th. That happened when the President vetoed the extension bill Congress had sent up to him. He said it didn't do the job. Congress had a different notion. All through the month of July since, Congress has been wrangling over a new bill, trying to find something both houses can live with. The Senate even sat a rare Saturday session yesterday, working late into the afternoon on it. That tells you something about how hard the wrangling's gotten. And while Washington wrangles, prices here at home have kept right on climbing, week by week. Retail food is up close to 14% just in the month of July alone. Meat is up around a third since June. Say that number over to yourself next time you're at the counter and you'll understand a few faces you've been seeing lately. Dairy is up near a fifth over the same stretch. Milk, butter, the whole of it. Sugar is still rationed, the last of it left over from the war. You've still got stamps sitting in your purse or your kitchen drawer, and you'll be using them a while yet before it's over. It's a strange thing, isn't it? Still tearing out a little paper stamp for sugar a full year after the shooting stopped. Down at the diner, Dot Weaver's been chalking the day's hamburger price up on her menu board, same as some men chalk the weather on the barn. She's got opinions about all of it, and she does not keep them to herself, which is half of why folks go in there in the first place. I stopped in Thursday and watched her do it. She stood back, looked at the number, and shook her head at it like it had done something to her personally. She picked up that stub of chalk, wrote the new figure, and just stood there a second, studying it, the way you'd study a bad report card. She told me, and I'll pass it along just as she said it. I've stopped erasing the old number. I just chalk the new one bigger, right underneath it, so folks can see the whole sorry climb for themselves. Sure enough, there it was, one figure stacked right on top of the last three, like rings on a tree. That's Dot for you. She'll feed you and educate you in the same 5 minutes. Over at the hardware store, Earl Hollis keeps a gray ledger behind the counter, has for going on 2 years now. That's his waiting list. Folks who signed up back when there wasn't a washing machine or a decent radio to be had anywhere in the county. Earl tells me the shelves are filling back in, slow but steady, month by month, same as everywhere else in the country, I'd imagine. There's still names on that list, mind you, still folks waiting on a washing machine, but Earl says the list is shorter than it was back in the spring. He crossed off 3 names just this week, he told me, with a look on his face like it was Christmas morning. One of those 3 was Mrs. Purdy, as it happens, who's been waiting since before her daughter Alice was out of high school and who's about due for some good news in that household anyway, as you'll hear later on. That's about as much good news as anybody's promising you on the price front this week, neighbors, but I'll take it, and I imagine you will too. Now let's turn to Washington for the full roundup of what your government did this week. Monday, the President put his signature to the loan to Britain, $3,750 million all told. The House had already passed it, Saturday before, by a vote of 219 to 155. It's meant to help Britain get back on its feet after 6 years of war, buy the goods and the machinery it needs, keep trade moving between our 2 countries. There was plenty of debate before that vote, plenty of talk about whether this country ought to be lending such a sum to anybody, ally or not. But whatever you think of loaning that kind of money abroad, it's done now, signed and sealed, and the Wire says it's the largest such loan this country has ever made to another nation. Tuesday brought 2 changes to how your government is organized, and both are worth knowing about. The government created a new Bureau of Land Management to oversee the public lands out west. That's grazing land, timberland, mineral land, millions of acres of it, all needing one office to keep track of who's using what. And it reorganized Social Security under a brand new agency, the Social Security Administration, to run the whole program going forward. Neither one will change much for folks around here day to day, but it's the kind of housekeeping Washington does quietly, and it adds up over the years. Friday brought a vote a good many women in this county were watching closely. The Equal Rights Amendment for women came up in the Senate, and it fell short, 38 votes for, 35 against. It needed 2/3 of the Senate to pass, and it did not get there, not by a fair margin. Supporters on the floor argued it was a plain matter of fairness under the law. Opponents argued it would undo protections some states already had on the books for women workers. So that measure will have to wait for another Congress, another year to try again. And Saturday brought the biggest news out of the Capitol all week, at least for a certain kind of family. The Joint Congressional Committee that spent months looking into Pearl Harbor issued its final report. The majority found no evidence that the late President Roosevelt provoked that attack or had advance knowledge he withheld. Instead, the committee laid the blame on the commanders on the ground at Hawaii that morning, Admiral Kimmel and General Short. That closes a long chapter for a great many families who lost sons and husbands that Sunday morning, 5 Decembers back now. Whatever you make of the findings yourself, it's been a long 5 years waiting on an answer, and now there's one down on paper. Now let's step outside our own borders for a stretch, because it's been a large week for the world as well. Over in Paris, the invitations are out, and delegations from 21 nations are gathering for a peace conference. It opens July the 29th at the Luxembourg Palace, a grand old building I understand was built for a French queen a few centuries back. The nations there will be working out the peace treaties for Italy and for the Balkan countries, settling the terms now that the shooting there has stopped. Delegations are already arriving by train and by air, the wire says, with staffs of clerks and translators trailing behind every minister. That's slow, careful work, the kind that doesn't make headlines day to day, but it's the work that decides how Europe settles for the next while. In Palestine, the tension has not let up. British authorities there have kept curfews in place and continued arms searches following the arrests they made back in late June. It is an uneasy peace over there, if you can even call it that, and the wire gives no sign of it easing soon. That's about all there is to say on it tonight, neighbors, and I'll leave it there. Out in the Pacific, at Bikini Lagoon, the Navy is deep in preparations for its second atomic test. You'll recall the first one on July the 1st, an airburst that sank 5 ships of that old target fleet out there. This next one is a different proposition entirely. It goes off underwater directly beneath the fleet rather than above it. Navy divers have spent the whole month of July down in that lagoon, remooring ships that shifted or nearly capsized after the first blast, patching hulls, getting everything set for another go. Crews have been out on launches day after day in that heat, running new anchor lines, checking the old ones, making sure the target ships hold their positions when the moment comes. It is careful, dangerous work done mostly out of sight, and the men doing it don't get their names in the paper, but they're the ones making the test possible. Over in Britain, bread rationing begins today, this very Sunday, for the first time. That is a thing they did not do even in the darkest years of the war, when the bombs were falling on London nightly. A town like ours, with wheat standing tall in the county fields right now, can spare a plain thought of sympathy for a country that's come to that. In Belgrade this past Wednesday, the Yugoslav General Draza Mihailovic was put before a firing squad and executed, following his conviction there for treason. He'd led resistance forces during the war, and the post-war government that convicted him is a different government altogether, which tells you something about how tangled that part of the world has gotten. And in China, word from the wire is not encouraging. The truce General Marshall worked so long and so hard to arrange between the government and the communist forces there is coming apart at the seams. Fighting is spreading in several provinces now, and nobody on the wire seems to think it's going to mend itself soon. A big world this week, neighbors, and not all of it easy news, not by a long stretch. Let's come on back home now, where things run a little lighter, and where I imagine you'd rather be anyway. Sports. And there's a story out of Boston that is going to be talked over in every barbershop in this country for a good while yet. Last Sunday, out at Fenway Park, in the first game of a doubleheader against Cleveland, Ted Williams stepped up and hit a home run. Then he came up again later in that same game and hit another one. And then, so the wire tells it, he came up a third time and hit a third home run, clean out of the park. 3 home runs, 8 runs driven in, all in that one ball game. First time any Boston man has ever hit 3 home runs in a single game at Fenway Park. That's not a small thing. Fenway's been standing since 1912, and no Red Sox man in all that time had done it. Now here's the part the barbershops are really chewing on. In the second game of that same doubleheader, Cleveland's manager, Lou Boudreau, did something nobody had quite seen before. He pulled his whole infield around, shifted it clean over to the right side of second base, stacking it up against Williams, daring him to hit it the other way. Folks are calling it a shift now, plain and simple, and half the men I talk to think it's clever managing, and the other half think it's a kind of insult to the game. I heard 3 different opinions on it down at the barbershop myself this week, and not one man in that chair agreed with the other 2. One fellow said Boudreau ought to be ashamed, playing checkers instead of baseball. Another said if it works, it's not cheating, it's just plain smart. The barber himself stayed out of it entirely, which I thought showed the good sense you'd want in a man holding a razor that close to your throat. Whatever you think of it, the Red Sox are none the worse for it. They lead the American League by better than 9 games as of today. Over in the National League, Brooklyn holds first place, but the Cardinals are charging hard behind them, and it's shaping up to be a real pennant fight down the stretch. And over in Scotland, earlier this month, Sam Snead won the British Open out at St. Andrews by 4 full strokes. A fine showing for an American golfer on that old course, the kind they say the game itself was invented on centuries back. Closer to home now, and this is the game a lot of you were asking me about at church this morning. Coach Burkett's Legion Millers played Tuesday night out at the Diamond, and it was a real ball game right down to the last out. Close the whole way through. Neither side could pull ahead by more than a run or two at any point. Bottom of the last inning, 2 outs, and up comes young Pete Marsh. Pete's the kid brother to our own Johnny Marsh, the boy who anchored our 1941 championship club, if you'll recall that summer. Pete worked the count full, fouled off 2 pitches that looked like strike 3 to everybody in the bleachers, and then lined a clean single into left field to drive in the winning run. Johnny was right there on the first base side, same as always, watching the whole thing unfold with his arms crossed over the fence rail. He'd been throwing batting practice to that same bunch of kids all summer long, and I expect he had a hand in that swing whether he'd admit it or not. It's been a big week for the Marsh family all around, and I'll say no more on that for now, except that you'll hear his name again before we're through tonight. Now for the news from around the square, and there's a good deal of it this week, so bear with me. The village council took up the fairground barracks question again Thursday night, and it made for a lively meeting, from what I hear. Mayor Guthrie still wants those old fairground buildings fitted out as temporary apartments for veterans' families that are doubled up all over this town right now. He stood up Thursday and said the fairground buildings are just sitting empty 11 months out of the year, while young families with babies are living in spare bedrooms and attics. He said he'd walked the fairgrounds himself that very morning, counting stalls and sheds, and figured a dozen families could be settled in before the first frost if the council would just say yes. It's the same shortage towns everywhere are wrestling with these days. You may have heard talk of the Wyatt Housing Program out of Washington. This is our own local version of that same problem, right here on our square. Some of the merchants around the square spoke up against it Thursday night, worried about the look of the fairgrounds and about extra traffic and extra noise so close to their storefronts. One merchant said he didn't relish the idea of laundry lines strung up where the prize hogs used to be judged every fall. One man stood up and said it wasn't the fairgrounds' fault there's a housing shortage, and asked where exactly the mayor expected these families to go otherwise. That last remark got some applause from what I'm told, and a fair amount of muttering too, depending on which side of the room you were sitting. No vote was taken either way. The whole matter was carried over again to next month's meeting, same as it was the month before that. I expect we'll be talking about this one again come August, and I don't imagine the arguing will have cooled off much by then. Over at Harmon County Canning, the season has opened, and the tomatoes are coming in ahead of schedule this year. That's good news for anybody hoping for steady hours down at the plant this summer, and I hear they're already talking about taking on extra hands for the peak weeks. The plant manager tells me the crates started arriving from the Osborne fields a full week earlier than last year on account of that warm stretch back in June. From the sheriff's office, Sheriff Stackhouse reports a quiet week overall, and I'll tell you the 2 items worth mentioning. Wednesday afternoon, some livestock got loose out on the county pike. A handful of the Hendricks boys' cows had wandered clean through a broken fence and were standing in the middle of the road, chewing away, not bothered in the least. It took most of the afternoon and 3 deputies to walk them back home, and I understand there was considerable honking of car horns involved before it was over. One of those cows, so the story goes, sat herself down right in the crosswalk by the feed store and would not be moved for love nor grain bucket. And here's the tail end of a story we told you back in May. You'll recall a rowboat turned up missing down at the mill pond that month, borrowed without so much as a by your leave from whoever's boat it was. Well, this week that same rowboat turned up again, tied up right at the spot it started from, neat as you please. Tucked inside it was a note of thanks, unsigned, and $2 folded up for the trouble the borrowing caused. Whoever you are, the sheriff says he's not looking for you, and the owner says the $2 more than covers it. Good of you to make it right. Doc Ainsley stopped by the station Friday, and he tells me the maternity ward over at the hospital has been busier than the war years ever kept him. He's been doing some reading on the side, too. A new baby book written by a doctor out of New York named Spock, published just last Sunday. Doc had a copy right there in his coat pocket, dog-eared already, with pencil marks in the margins where he'd been checking the man's work, I suppose. I asked Doc for his verdict on it, and he gave me one, plain as anything, and I'll quote him exactly. He said, "Mostly what your grandmother said, but it's nice to see it in print." That's Doc for you. 40 years delivering babies in this county, and he's not about to be told much he doesn't already know. Now, a proud item, and I know a good many of you have been waiting on this one. Our own Vera Hale, Maple Falls High School class of 1939, daughter of the shoe shop on Water Street, has got a record spinning on this very station before the stores in this county even have it in stock. Her mother has been bringing clippings down to the courier office nearly every week this month, and the editor there tells me he's running out of room to print them all. I don't blame Mrs. Hale one bit for being proud. That girl used to sing in the high school chorus right here in this town in the back row, if I recall correctly, and now she's on the radio for the whole country to hear. Wedding bells are coming this September, and it's a match a lot of this town has been rooting for. Sergeant Johnny Marsh and Miss Alice Purdy will be married at First Methodist Church. And like half the young couples in this country right now, they are still hunting for a place to live. Same story as the fairground barracks, just with 2 more names attached to it. Down at the Bijou this week, along with the newsreel, they're showing Anna and the King of Siam. Worth the price of admission, from what folks around the square have been telling me. The big radio stars are off for the summer, resting up same as the rest of us, but the shows filling in for them are carrying on just fine, so don't let that stop you from tuning in of an evening. And the #1 record in the land, 10 weeks running now, is The Gypsy by the Ink Spots. 10 weeks is a long run for any song. You'll hear it on this station most every hour, and from what I can tell around this town, nobody minds one bit. That's the news, and that's the square, and that's the week, neighbors. This newscast comes to you by arrangement with Hollis Hardware, right on the square, where Earl's been keeping that gray ledger of his since the war. Earl asked me to remind you of his standing motto, and he stands by it. If they don't have it, you don't need it yet. Next Sunday, whatever the week brings, good or otherwise, we'll be right here to tell you about it. Until then, enjoy this good stretch of summer weather while it lasts. From the 2nd floor above the furniture store, take care of each other, neighbors, and I will see you Sunday. That's the week. This is Ray Colton, WMPQ, Maple Falls. Good night.
Under the stars we feel so blessed. Oh, down on the square, porch swings are swaying there with a cold glass of sweet lemonade. While we watch the big parade, the band shell plays a happy tune underneath the summer moon. The children run and chase the sparks of fireflies across the parks. Grandpa tells a tale or two under skies of deepest blue. There is no place we'd rather be than in this lovely company. Oh,
street lamps glow on Maple Street, where sweet and quiet memories meet. The courthouse clock strikes 9:30, and all is peaceful, all is fine. Oh, my sweet old hometown under the moon, the stars are humming a familiar tune. No matter how far my traveling feet roam, the silver light on the valley calls me home. The scent of pine upon the breeze whispers through the willow trees. The front porch swing is swaying slow in the golden amber shadowed glow. My sweet old hometown under Rome, the silver dew on the valley holds me home.
At midnight we meet under emerald light, a quiet longing in the velvet of the night, still longing for you. Midnight paints the river in an emerald glow. I keep your memory burning where the lamplights low. Every whispered promise drifting with the smoke. I wear this lonely evening like a velvet cloak. So I'll sing to the midnight alone.